And Chief McGinley said he doesn't care if, I mean, that's up to you guys. If you guys want to wait until May 5th, I believe is our meeting.
Seems like this should be business taken up in May.
Yeah, it does to me too.
That makes sense.
Serenity.
Okay.
Oh, I wasn't listening.
I mean,
The
that way
stream's not
it's-
working still.
May 5th is the first Monday.
Right, we were thinking that originally that both of the reviews were due before the first council meeting in May, so.
Yeah, what I was going off of originally on Chief Knutson's was, like I said, his May 2nd anniversary.
I make a motion to delay the ordinance for Knutson and McGinley until the May 5th
Second.
meeting. Or personnel meeting, however that goes after the new board is installed. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So Matthew, you'll adjust the agenda.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, let's see. May 5th. You could do it to be effective the May 11th. Pay period starting May 11th. All right, if you don't have any questions about this. Steel City Media. So, we talked about an RFP for this and discussed I think what we'll just talk about was we wanted to be consistent with the purchasing policy. So the purchasing policy has some exemptions. One is sole source provider. And inside I've included a statement from the company along with their updated proposal. And you guys can determine if you, by you guys, I mean the board of Aldermen can determine if they think that this meets that criteria or if they want it to go forward in the RFP. I think an RFP for this particular thing will be a little difficult because you'll want to write it in a way that's very precise. So whoever responds is comparing apples to apples. My experience with RFPs is sometimes you don't always get that. Sometimes you're trying to compare apples to oranges and it just really makes it more difficult. I did look on the internet and do a little research on this. There's software that has aspects of this. There's recruiting companies that have aspects of this. But I think like they're talking about, it's their opinion that all of the aspects that they're offering under this proposal are pulled into one thing. And whether anybody else does that, I wasn't able to find that. A lot of times with RFPs too, we check our bid book that the city clerk keeps to see what providers we can contact. And I've never received anything from a company that's similar to what this proposal is. So I mean, putting that information together, issuing an RFP would, we'd have to figure out who you're going to contact because we haven't had anyone contact us other than the Still Media.
Serenity, you brought up a lot of questions at the last meeting about this, reading through this, or have you had a chance to?
I kind of started to glance at the, you talking about the purchasing guidelines?
Yeah, but again, why is personnel talking about this?
Well, because it was a recruiting matter.
Okay.
When we did the windows here, the guys are doing now, that was a quote that was what, around $30,000. Was it published in the paper?
Mhm.
I think Lisa got quotes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't really involved with that process, but I don't
Right.
think it was published in the paper now.
So I guess my point is that as we try our best, sometimes this happens. There are no federal or state laws regarding purchasing. What is in the city code is what the board has put on themselves to show that they're doing their due diligence to make sure that the city's getting the best pricing. It's really what it's for.
Well, and that was when my initial question, I wasn't even really thinking about the purchasing policy. I was just curious if there were, because with me doing networking, I mean, I personally know a media company that, from my understanding, does something very similar. I could talk to them and just see if they do and if they'd offer it in this area, just so we
Absolutely.
know if there's competitors.
If you want, I can forward this proposal to you,
That
and you could forward it to them and say, are you able to pull all these aspects
Mhm.
together? Now, this Steel Media, they do, what do you say, Air Force, up the phone there.
He was already.
Yeah, there was a few different government.
A couple of branches of the
Mhm.
military.
Yeah, military, and I think they said they work with police
Right,
regularly too.
yes, he's former law enforcement.
Yeah. Well, and that's, when it came to my head, it wasn't, I just had heard of other companies like this, so I wanted to make sure that we were
Right,
getting the best price, basically what this policy was put in place for, to make sure that we are picking the best provider with the best price for the city, since we're spending other people's money, not our own.
right.
Very true.
And then once I brought it up, and then we brought up the policy, I was like, oh man, I really hadn't even thought of it until
Yeah.
we brought it up. And then I was like, well, let's make sure, one, that we're following our own policies before we move forward.
And I think when the board decided to move that forward, originally it was the March 17th council meeting
Mhm.
when I was out with the flu, so I wasn't here to say, well, hold on.
Mhm. Yeah.
Or anything like that, or for us to talk it through.
Mhm.
So,
So even, my opinion would be, I mean, I'll talk to the person that I know, and maybe she can even direct me to other media companies that she's aware of, because she's, a player in the Kansas City area. I'd assume maybe she's familiar with other.
obviously,
Marketing
there's
company.
lots of media.
Yes.
There's
This
lots
one
of
might be the
news
best,
and radio.
considering their experience with government, police, law
Right.
enforcement. I just want to make sure that we are picking the best one. And first of all, I mean, make sure that we're following our own policy, because if,
Right.
especially if we know that we're it's one thing to make a mistake, it's another thing to acknowledge that, it's incorrect and then do it anyway. So that's what I want to make sure. So I definitely have to read over this whole
Right.
thing.
There has been times in the past, they're very rare, that I've seen the board say, we're going to, in this situation, what's the motion, Bruce? Where you're not going to use the purchasing policy, we're gonna suspend it, I think is maybe
Okay.
a term. Like I said, it's very rare,
Mm-hmm.
but it does happen. And then there's also exceptions. But I wanted to make sure you guys had the purchasing
Yes,
policy.
that's very helpful.
Because I think what was said at the council meeting was, yeah, you gotta get 3 bids if it's over $100 or $1,000. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not a fair representation.
That's
of
always
the
That might be
purchasing
practice. It's not
policy.
Yeah.
So, it's a little more
Yeah,
robust than
complex.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the agenda goes out tomorrow, has to be posted. Can you have your answer by tomorrow? Or you want to postpone this until the first meeting in May?
About if we should put it out to other bids.
The Steel City, the whole Steel City.
Well,
You're not.
unfortunately, it's not my decision. I mean, that would come to the whole board to decide if we wanted to
table it or.
Yeah, if we wanted to bring other bids or not. I mean, I don't feel like I could make that decision right now and just tell you to bring it forward or not.
Well, it's been tabled, it depends if you want to bring it up Monday or 2 weeks from Monday.
I mean, I think we should at least discuss the purchasing policy and decide how we move forward with, if we want to then at the next meeting, just bring it forward to,
Right, that would help.
I think
To know what the board
when the new board is installed, this needs to be on their part of the agenda.
Yeah.
To discuss and figure out how they want to handle it.
Right now, it's not on the agenda for Monday night.
so,
Unless
So we
something
would-
changes, it will not be on the agenda. Steel City will not be on the agenda.
so I think what would be on the agenda is not the ordinance for Steel City specifically, but just the discussion about if we're bringing it to
Right,
multiple
That- That's
bids.
old business, and that would be the old board discussing that.
It would be,
Yeah, you always do old business, and
well,
Eh,
we tabled it. It
Yeah,
was tabled. So I would,
a table is just until it's brought back up, right?
right,
so you can bring it back up, but if it's old business.
So it's in my HR report.
That's
The
true.
HR report is on the agenda.
After
We,
the new council is sworn in.
Yeah, it's in with the new,
so it was a little bit confusing because we're meeting with the personnel committee.
mhm,
Because we don't have newly elected officials sworn in
mhm.
for them to be, for the personnel committee that's going forward to be installed.
Yep.
So my thought originally was that personnel business would come with the old board. And I only say that because this is the personnel committee recommending to the board. I guess
Well, I
another
think-
option is,
this
Yeah.
part is the current board.
so we
Because that's-
could write that up to say these are our recommendations
To the new,
the
yeah.
incoming board.
So we would have the expenses and the
Consent agenda.
consent agenda
Old
to approve,
business.
and then the new board is sworn in.
Yeah.
And then they go from there.
I submitted a potential agenda to Matthew. I would feel that included. Call meeting to order.
Is this in
Prayer,
the
pledge,
agenda?
consent
As of
agenda.
now, no.
It
Old
definitely
business,
should be.
council discussion.
Even just so that everyone have the chance to read it before the
swearing in,
meeting.
And then new council would also have Alderman time to count.
It is the only thing.
Well, I guess in old business, we
Just-
could bring it up what we discussed here. And
I
then
don't know if there's
the
anything
new
else in here
board
that's
will
super.
go forward with however they want to proceed.
The department head
Whatever.
reports be with the new board.
Yeah.
Including George's.
Does that seem reasonable?
I would say just bring it up in the department head meeting, because Georgia said it was on her list of agenda for the new board. And at that time, you could say, it's been discussed in committee and recommendation was this. But either way, we probably,
Do you have a recommendation about Still Media?
I do not, because we don't know if there's other like companies out there.
And we don't know yet.
Well, they went through their legal department to provide you the statement they provided you. So some attorney somewhere said it's fine for you
Where's that statement? Is that
to
in here?
respond to this by saying that you are unique in pulling this information together. Because like what Serenity and I were talking about, media companies, okay, of course, there's a million media companies. But what these guys are doing is using AI recruiting tools, they're using social media, they're using geofencing, they're somehow targeting certain groups of people so that we're advertising only to them. Not like a broadcast on the radio where 50,000 people are gonna hear it. We're targeting law enforcement.
Which, I mean, that in and of itself is something that is implemented by most advertising nowadays. Like even right now, I can do a Facebook ad and I can target it to target 18 to 20-year-olds in Kansas City. The AI is something that's more innovative, but from what I've heard from my networking, it's something that most media companies are utilizing now to some extent. I'm sure some are doing it better than others. That's kind of something to investigate to see who's utilizing it well, how much does it cost. So from what I heard from this pitch, to me, it sounded like something that I'm familiar with. Most media companies are utilizing them. I don't know about all of the, utilizing every single one of them at the same time.
Right.
But that's, I mean, I can try and look into it today and send an email out by tonight, just so that way the board has some more information on,
That'd be great.
yeah.
And then, of course, the concern as well with this was, the longer it takes for us to do this, the longer we're running with very little staff.
Well, this was not included in our budget for fiscal year 25.
Mm-hmm.
Overtime is, we don't want to burn out our people, that we've got a new board coming in. They may see things different, and it would be the old board putting something on the new board.
And you probably saw on the personnel agenda, we have a communications officer who's going from full-time to part-time. That department is supposed to have 6 full-time people. This will make it so that they only have 3. And I assume that they have enough reserves to fill in, but if they don't, it's not unheard of that police officers would do it.
Yeah.
Probably want to keep the bathroom break or something.
So yeah, I mean, it's just, it's kind of thin down there, so. Anyway, we'll move on. The remote work policy, so that was amended by the board during discussion before the vote.
Mm-hmm.
So I just sent it over to the attorney that had already reviewed what we had and said, does this change anything? And she felt like adding some statements throughout the document would make it more consistent with what the board wanted in, added in.
Is that the underlined portion under page 3, department head managing remote work assignments?
No, I will mark up for you the changes that she made. I don't have it marked up on this one. So the other thing that was added to this as well, the last time, I think there were some questions about who's essential and who's not. And it's not really addressed in the personnel manual. It's defined but it's not defined in a very clear way. It's really vague in our personnel manual. So it is defined in here on page 2, the top paragraph, where it says essential employees is defined as being required to work on site due to the position's responsibilities related to emergency services and circumstances considered necessary by the city. So an example of necessary by the city that maybe isn't viewed as emergency services would be like public works. If there's if tornadoes come through and there's trees down in the road, before fire and police can get to them, you've got to clear the trees. And that would be public works. So I know a lot of people don't think of them as emergency, but they are a part of it, emergency response. Departments considered essential are the fire, EMS department, police department, communications department, and public works.
I want to put admin.
So that was the change to this, and like I said, I'll mark it up for the council meeting. I'm going to make a note right now to make sure that I do not forget.
So would we be voting on this then, with the changes?
We voted on it as amended, so.
So is it just to
Well,
view?
So this will have to be brought up to be approved.
That's what I'm, so it'll be, will it have to get reapproved with the
Are those-
changes?
Okay, those change, I mean, we voted on it as amended, so are those changes you're talking about significant enough to,
So you voted on it as an ordinance, so an ordinance always has to be changed with another ordinance. But you tell me your thoughts. My thoughts, again, are like, let's not do the ordinance until we know we have what we want. And then we can move it forward to ordinance.
Have-
That way it's not being changed on the fly,
Yeah.
you know?
So basically, you're suggesting bring it forward as a draft, and then we kind of approve the draft, and then we bring forward, I think that's a great idea.
Thank you. All right, the ride-along program, I think you probably remember Chief Commission talking about this. So our attorneys drafted this and, you know, I sent them hold harmless information, hold harmless, that our insurer wants to see in the contract and what other guidelines, and so they drafted it based on that. And then there's a couple of exhibits with it. Waiver of liability and the confidentiality agreement are both for the, what would be for the students to sign. But the cooperative agreement is for, between Ray County and Pleasant Valley. This, well, I think you already know, this would go forward as an ordinance, for the next meeting. And the reason why this is on my report, this is a risk liability issue, and so I worked with the chief to get that figured out and ready for approval of the board. All right, informational, so NPR will be here May 13th for, kind of kick off open enrollment. Employees and elected officials will have until May 30th to enroll, and that enrollment is online. Although we do also ask the board to fill out a form that you'll get. In fact, before you leave today, let me give you that new hire paperwork. The form's in there, and that way you can go over it.
good.
So it's just that we have something on record that shows that it was declined. You guys are familiar with that. So that new plan year starts July 1st, and that's why they asked for everything to be in for beginning of June, so they can get the cards out, whatever they need to do in the process. That's all I've got. Do you have any questions about anything?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Just put that under old business. Agenda.
I don't know if it can be in the HR report.
Let's see, well, maybe right, it's already on there, under her report, so.
Maybe.
I still want to get past it and have
Yeah.
that discussion.
Yeah,
I think as long as it's under
with her.
report,
Mhm.
maybe asterisks, so that you remember to bring it up, or if she doesn't,